It's the fourth time now as well that I have the pleasure of introducing Derek. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing like last year, where I just want one thought that everybody takes away, for hearing from Derek Yach, which is that throughout his entire career, many of you know about it, he's been a relentless fighter against smoking, to stop smoking. He pursues every avenue he can find to combat the smoking epidemic as we know it. So, Derek, the floor is yours again for the proceedings of the day to start, and please give him an applause. Thank you.
Well, good morning to everybody, and wonderful to see you all here. And to remind you that the elephant is still in the room, as you'll see above us. It's always scary how fast the time passes, and I'm not going to go into an update on everything since last year. But let me just start off by thanking the incredible team of Martin, Kylie, Robert, and Michelle for putting this meeting together again. And I think a big round of applause is due to them. The planning for these kind of meetings actually begins today for next year, as it always does. And we're always keen to get your sense of gaps and opportunities and try and anticipate what's going to happen over the next year. As Robert said, just a few comments about the program, and then I'm going to go straight into a couple of opening words and also hopefully start with some time because we've got far better speakers than me ahead of us. I think the focus on regulatory and trade issues is fully understandable given the massive shifts that we're seeing in everything from tariffs and trade policy and the upending of the world trade system. It will have implications for areas of work. Some of those will be touched upon. And I think we'll have some extremely thoughtful discussions on those. This will be an issue that we'll be looking at over the next few years, I suspect. Secondly, the advance in science and evidence, and some really practical examples of where we're starting to see success, I hope will come through. And we've got far more examples of success growing every year. One big theme will also be upon who is benefiting and who's not yet benefiting from access to tobacco harm reduction products, and that's a panel that Rachel will chair later. The intent to go after oral nicotine and the innovations and the potential is really based on that perhaps being one of the big stories of the year, that we've seen a massive upsurge by large companies, small companies, different types of innovations around the world, moving the oral nicotine program ahead. And it may be one of the few examples where we're seeing support coming from a very wide variety of folk across the political, the financial, the academic sector that I think augurs well potentially for the future. Anybody who goes down to Wall Street, by the way, will find that there are probably too many expelled pouches around the outside of the trading store, which are keeping the traders awake these days. As you'll see if you walk around Central Park, you'll find them as well, warning us that excess use is already giving round to waste, but the use has gone up through the roof. And then finally, none of this is possible without investment. And I think the discussion on the investment landscape in the last session is what also makes this meeting fairly unique, is that we've got researchers, innovators, and investors all talking about issues at the same time. So hopefully this will be an exciting program for you, and we hope that there'll be enough time, both in the formal and in particularly in the informal sessions, to have high degrees of discussion. So with that, let me move to make a couple of comments as we think about why we have this meeting here now, and remind people that every year for the previous 3 years, this was obviously on the eve of the UN General Assembly. But this year we can truly say that we're at a pivotal moment for global health. This year coincides with the UN high-level meeting that later this week will focus on NCDs and mental health. And we know that the urgency couldn't be greater, given that in WHO's own report, it says that the targets for NCDs are off target, their words, which basically means that millions of people continue to die prematurely from preventable, poorly managed conditions such as cancer, heart disease, and chronic lung disease. These, as we know, are not just statistics, and some of the work I've done has allowed me to start looking deeper into low middle income countries where you can see the pain and suffering that this causes around the world. Last week, the WHO released a new report that prioritizes sweeping tax increases on tobacco, sugary sodas, and alcohol, framing these as the cornerstone of the strategy to get NCD program back on track. The report warns against industry interference at every turn, yet it fails to acknowledge the promise of industry-led innovations. And I've been spending a lot of time looking at the innovations we've seen over the last few years, not just in our field. GLP-1 agonists for obesity and diabetes are cutting the stigma that so many people with obesity suffer and opening the door for the first time to getting obesity levels down. Tobacco harm reduction products are doing the same in our fields of tobacco control. And groundbreaking immunotherapies coming out of the oncology and the pharmaceutical industry are making survival where that seemed impossible possible, and not just for advanced industrialized countries. Those who smoke, live with mental health, cancer, or obesity, we know are too often marginalized, compounding the challenges they face and impeding public health programs. This tax-centric approach is an unprecedented contraction, in my view, of global health funding and is really a response to the deep cuts in WHO's budget. Anybody reading the last few months will have seen that there have been horrific cuts imposed both by the administration here, but also by the German and British government on global health. These are the deepest, largest cuts we've experienced in 3 decades. And the financial constraints will particularly be felt in the area of NCDs, who are starting to actually see the benefit of being part of the broader global health agenda. This will obviously affect us in tobacco control. That's why we're here at this new partnerships meeting, to see whether we can chart a smarter path forward. We know that we have 1 billion people worldwide who smoke, and it's exhausting to keep giving the figures, and about 8.5 million people every year lose their lives from tobacco products. Despite decades of global advocacy, the WHO's Framework Convention, the smoking rates have declined on average, but not in some of the major low-middle-income countries. Let's remember that in countries like China and Indonesia, male smoking rates still exceed 50%. 50%. A level comparable to what the OECD faced in the 1960s. That's not progress. While the OECDs have made some progress, and some pretty dramatic progress, much of the world is still trapped in a cycle of widespread cigarette addiction. And even across the OECD, we're seeing the rates among women rising relative to men. And in most of the OECD, lung cancer death rate in women are higher than breast cancer death rates by far, something we don't talk about enough. Compounding the challenge is the global funding that I mentioned. And without that funding and new sources of funding, it really is going to behove industry, nonprofits, and enlightened new players to do more. So the current approach by WHO, to remind us, is to increase the tobacco tax by 50%. And many countries are requiring that they have equal taxes on harm reduction products and cigarette products. The consequence of this, we know, will have disastrous effects. First, steep hikes fuel illicit trade. And to put it in context, about 50 to 60% of cigarettes on the South African market are now defined as illicit. This is something that grew fast out of the ban on cigarettes during the pandemic. When prices soar, black markets thrive, criminal networks expand, and public health objectives are undermined. This is well known. Many of you in the room have known this for decades. You've documented it for decades. Yet, unfortunately, the leaders of the report, funded by Bloomberg, include allegedly some of our great economists, including Larry Summers, and great financiers, Michael Bloomberg, seem oblivious to the fact that this is going to have these disastrous effects. And it's not just illicit trade and criminal elements. I always remind people that it was in this city, in 2002, that the UN hosted a meeting on illicit trade and terrorism. And this was something that the Alcohol and Tobacco Firearms wanted to do to bring attention to the consequence of smuggling of cigarettes from North Carolina to Canada, leading to the first terrorism case where the funding was going off to support Hezbollah. That is still a reality across many parts of the world, where we have no idea where the excess profits are going. And it's very likely that they are going into more than the illicit trade and criminal element. The second consequence of increasing the taxes, and particularly equalizing the taxes, is that if you treat harm reduction products equally, we know that it'll stop people switching or keep people smoking and therefore increase the death rate. If we're truly committed to ending smoking, we need to avoid these prohibitionist policies. The rest of the meeting, we know, will focus on the way forward that you know so well. We must embrace harm reduction. We must eliminate unnecessary regulatory and ideological barriers and foster the environment where innovation can thrive. And let's always remember that the one error we all made in the Framework Convention was to avoid the words innovation, patents, and new knowledge, even though harm reduction was one of the original objectives of the Framework Convention. The government should be encouraging, not stifling, the development and scale-up of safer nicotine products. The private sector must be engaged as full partners, and we know that their exclusion and prohibition is really unacceptable and is not in line, in my view, with the true legal interpretation of 5.3, which is being used as a ruse to block discussion among non-parties to the convention who should have the full right to engage. History shows that harm reduction works. We have Mark Tyndall with us, and we're really thrilled and privileged to have you here, Mark. His work has shown the power of needle exchanges, opioid substitution therapies, and a wide range that fall within a human rights approach. And we hope that we'll be able to do far more to adopt and use the harm reduction approach to address our work. So let me just end by saying that we always have a choice. We could spend the whole meeting being critical of the failings of the current players, or we could say, what can we be doing to actually make progress at a faster rate, whether or not they're going to give us support. And I hope we take more of the latter. And knowing many of the work that you're doing around these tables is already well underway, I think this should be a year in which we start making even more progress. Thank you.